Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I rise in the House today to speak to C-65, and I'll use the official title for the moment, an Act to amend the Elections Act. But, Madam Speaker, I would first ask for unanimous consent for myself to split the time with my honourable colleague from St. Albert, Edmonton.
Does the honourable have unanimous consent to split his time? Agreed? Agreed. The honourable member Chatham-Kent Leamington.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you. I often begin my interventions in this chamber with the following statement. It's an honour for me to bring the voices of the residents of Chatham-Kent Leamington to this place. Madam Speaker, I only have and retain that privilege by a process. It's the election process, and that's what Bill C-65 purportedly seeks to amend. And running in and the timing of an election should always be about maintaining the confidence of this place, about putting a vision forward for the country, and about running on one's record in serving the country. And so while some of the provisions of this bill are supportable, Conservatives have serious concerns concerning the changing of the fixed election date. Let me first make a few comments with respect to the laudable provisions contained in the bill. The modest changes to the third-party regime, where foreign entities should not be permitted to contribute to third parties that engage in election-related activities, is supportable. There's been much discussion regarding foreign interference in our elections, and so measures that address these activities can be supported. And while there are costs associated with advanced polling days and locations, they pale in comparison to the costs involved with the amendment to move the next election date from Monday, October the 20th, 2025 to October 27th, 2025. And so any further possible committee examination of this bill should be contingent on addressing this following point. These additional 7 days will cost Canadian taxpayers millions of dollars. And I will be focusing on this aspect of the legislation in my remarks today because this provision makes this bill an MP pension bill impersonating as an elections bill. So this begs the question, why are they doing it? Now, the Liberals are claiming that they're changing the election date to not overlap with the festival of Diwali. And it just coincidentally happens to be that the 7-day additional delay will secure the pensions of over 80 MPs after 6 years of service, meaning any MP elected after October 21st, 2019 will only reach that 6-year threshold if the election is called after that date in 2025. And I will note, Madam Speaker, that this includes myself and 31 of my Conservative colleagues. And I'm prepared to run on my record, Madam Speaker. Will my Liberal colleagues make the same vow? Will they run on their respective records before October 21st, 2025? Madam Speaker, of the 80 members elected in 2029, here's how the breakdown of the members pushing that pension date breaks out across the political parties represented in this chamber. As I mentioned, Conservatives have 32 members of Parliament from the cohort of 2019, Liberals 22, Bloc Québécois 20, and NDP 6. The Conservative caucus and all of the 2019 cohort support running on our record and not delaying the final election date. Will the Bloc members also support not delaying the final election date for this election? And I welcome, in the Q&A that follow my remarks, any formal statement by the members on the record from that party. Similarly, I would invite my NDP colleagues, and they've been alluding to that as well, as have the Bloc, put on the record in your questions to me that you will not support this. That is first and foremost before we go on to any further discussions on this bill. Now, the Liberal government is adamant that the sole reason for this legislation is to strengthen our democracy. In fact, the Minister of Public Safety, Democratic Institutions and Intergovernmental Affairs was quoted in a recent National Post article saying the following, quote, "The government believes that a strong democracy begins with enabling Canadians to freely exercise their fundamental right to choose their representatives, and we will always be there to defend that right," end quote. But the actions of this government and this Prime Minister show otherwise. Back to foreign interference for a moment, and the intimidation that my colleague from Wellington Halton Hills and his family faced from foreign state actors. Our security agencies learned of this, informed the Prime Minister, and he did nothing. and the interference in the 2019 and 2021 elections at several ridings across this country. Where was the government action? What about the unnecessary invocation of the Emergencies Act? Again, an action that erodes the very foundational principles of our democracy, the rights of our citizens. And we only need to look at the conduct of our present Speaker, the lack of respect that he has for the nonpartisan role of his office, not once, not twice, but I'm sorry, I cannot keep track of the number of violations. This government continues to erode the institutions that support the foundation of our democracy. If the minister and the government are so concerned about the defense of democracy, why don't they give Canadians back some of the freedom from the fiscal black hole they've imposed upon the citizens of this nation, and not force us to pay an estimated $120 million if all MPs were to lose their seats in the next election? I have an idea, Madam Speaker. What if the government held the 2025 election on October the 6th, 2025 instead? That way it wouldn't interfere with Diwali, nor would it affect the Jewish celebration of Shemini Atzeret, allowing the Hindu, Jain, Sikh, and Buddhist communities and Jewish communities to vote on Election Day if they so chose not to vote in advance polls. It bears noting that this isn't the first time the issue has come to the forefront, in that in 2019, the Chief Electoral Officer ruled against changing the fixed election date. 2019, Arya Bain, a Jewish Orthodox woman running for the Conservatives in Eglinton Lawrence, attempted to have the October 21st election date switched to October 22nd. She wanted to avoid the overlap with the Jewish holiday of Shemini Atzeret, and I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, which was to begin October the 20th and end on October the 22nd of that year. The riding of Eglinton Lawrence was home to about 5,000 Orthodox Jewish voters in 2019, and the previous 2015 federal election had been decided by less than 4,000 votes. She argued the merits of her case based on the closeness of the results in the previous election. As I mentioned earlier, the Chief Electoral Officer in 2019 ruled against it, stating that there is no such thing as a perfect election day, especially in a country as diverse as Canada. He went on to say, quote, "There are always Canadians who are unable to vote on election day," end quote. Given the precedent set in 2019 by Elections Canada on that ruling, the government need not be selective in its observance of religious holidays. However, an October 6th election date would seem to resolve all of the possible issues around religious observances. Or even better yet, let's have an election now. That's right. That allows this government to run on its carbon tax record that it so proudly defends in this chamber. It can run on its housing record, it can run on its fiscal management of the country record. After 9 long years of this Liberal government, we can ill afford another selfish Liberal policy that will further bankrupt future generations to come. Conservatives will bring down inflation, allowing interest rates to fall by capping federal government spending with a dollar-for-dollar rule, and we will ensure Canadians are not on the hook for tens of millions of dollars in pensions by moving the election date for spurious or disingenuous purposes. This bill is an MP pension bill, impersonating as an election bill. Conservatives will restore hope to Canadians. We will bring it home for Canadians to unite this country for our common home. Your home, Madam Speaker, my home, our home, and let's bring it home. Thank you.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary, the Government House Leader.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. It's a bit much. You know, I don't want to defend the 30-plus Conservatives that have the largest number that will actually benefit, if he wants to look at it as a benefit. So you get 30 Conservatives, there's 20 Liberals, there's, I think, just under 20 Bloc, and there's a half dozen New Democrats that will be affected with it in regards to what it is that the member's actually talking about. And as opposed to trying to recognize that aspect and only that aspect, let's look in terms of how this legislation is going to enhance our electoral system. We're going to get more people participating in elections. I see that as a positive thing. That's why we're increasing the number of advanced polling days. That's why people will be able, or students will be able to vote on their campuses. These are positive measures. It's a majority government, and the question I have for the member, it's a minority government. That means a majority majority. So if a majority of the House want to change...
Allow for other questions. The honourable member for Chatham-Kent-Leamington.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you for the question. And I'm very relieved that I can assure you, to my honourable colleague from Winnipeg North, that he does not have to defend the interests of our Conservative members or of the Bloc members or of the NP. We will put that question, through you, Madam Speaker, to the Canadian. We are very willing to put that question to the Canadian electorate. They can decide. That's how this government works. That's how our institution of democracy should work. The issue of MP pensions should not come into play on an election. Period. Simple. Done.
Des commentaires.
Questions and comments. The honourable member for Tilburn. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I'd like to thank my colleague for his speech. I know he worked very hard last night to prepare this speech. Now, although many measures of this bill are in general aligned with the concept of the Bloc Québécois democracy, there are problematic aspects. Postponing the elections by 1 week means that that's only 6 days away from municipal elections in Quebec. We're talking about local democracy, which is very important, and we need to protect that. We want those two elections to be on very different dates. What does the honourable member think? The honourable member for Chatham-Kent-Leamington.
From Terrebonne for the question, and I do want to acknowledge the hard work that goes and preparation that goes into all the work that all members in this chamber do. And I also want to acknowledge the hard work of our municipal politicians. And as I said in my speech, that moving the election date ahead or even calling it any time would avoid exactly those conflicts regarding date. And again, I appreciate her and everyone's hard work in this chamber.
Questions and comments. Questions et commentaires. L'honorable député de Terrebonne.
The honourable member from... Yes, I'd like to commend my honourable colleague on his speech. Madam Speaker, my colleague just mentioned the matter of municipal elections, which is extremely important in Quebec, and because we need to mobilize the public so that they turn out for these elections. But there's also the very sensitive issue of pensions, Madam Speaker, and I know that my colleague raised this issue in his speech. I am very uncomfortable with telling Quebecers, hey, listen, we're going to push the election back. And the only message that you're going to get out of this is because there's a bunch of MPs elected in 2019 who need this extra week so they can get their pension. I think this is a terrible message to send because it fuels cynicism towards politics on the part of the public. So what does my colleague think about this bill and in terms of finding a different date, for example, 3 weeks earlier? So, just to keep the date away from municipal elections and to make people less cynical about elections and about the government. Thank you. The honourable member.
Respond.
Merci, Madam President.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
With the opinion expressed by my colleague, yes, cynicism is something that we should be addressing, and we should not be trying to drape an elections bill with, as he correctly characterized this, as an MP pension bill. We can talk about improvements to our elections, absolutely, but not when we're just trying to slip something through, pull the wool over the eyes of the Canadian electorate. Let's address that issue first, then there's opportunity to improve our election system. Thank you, Madam Speaker.